So how is this course going to help you achieve your goals? Well, there's many reasons why people take these kind of courses. Some people just want to learn how to code. Others want to make their own app and upload to the App Store. And some people want to get a job as a developer. Now, this course can help you do all of those things. Having said all that, Mammoth Interactive has a slightly different way of teaching, and this way of teaching is actually really effective, although it may be just a little bit different from what you're used to in school, and it might be a little bit different than what you're used to at a college or university. We like to build practical projects that you can add to your LinkedIn or resume, and by building multiple projects, you are going to learn the source code and the methodology automatically. So if you, believe it or not, were to build 10 very simple apps and just build them enough so that they could get on the App Store and sell them, you actually would be doing a lot more than what's normally taught in a computer science or computer engineering degree. A lot of schools only focus on the theory and they don't focus on the practicality. One thing that we like to do is hyperbolize the opposite. So you're going to be building a lot of practical apps, and these practical apps are going to be able to go on the App Store, and you can sell them on the App Store and start making money immediately, and you can add them to LinkedIn. Now, I discovered this way back in 2010, and when I produced a bunch of projects all by myself, my career started to skyrocket. And so I'm teaching you that right now. The more apps you build, the better you get. It's that simple. Not to say that this course doesn't have a lot of theory in it as well. We do have some theoretical courses, but these theoretical portions of the course are backed up with practical examples. So theory in itself is not necessarily bad. I just find that school, for example, colleges and universities, take it way too far, and they actually don't even teach the practicality at all. So by building a ton of apps, you actually learn quite a bit about coding, and what you can do is you can literally take one of these sections where you build an app and upload it to the App Store. And this section might take a half hour, an hour, or maybe even at most 2 hours. So in a few hours, you could have a sellable product on your app, on the App Store, and you can add that to your LinkedIn. So how does one become good at anything? This is a fundamental question that you have to ask yourself, whether you're learning how to code, 3D model, learn how to draw, learn how to cook. It doesn't matter what you're learning. You want to know how to become good as fast as possible, but you want to know how to become one of the best in your field. So how does one become the best in their field? Well, if you look at the way that athletes and musicians and other areas that include entertainment, a lot of these professions have to have a high level of finesse and a high level of excellence to actually even get a job. So what I've done over the last 10 years is look at how people in these positions get good. And it's actually very, very simple, but it's not as intuitive, and it's definitely not taught in school. So the way that we do things at Mammoth Interactive is we try to teach people how to become coding virtuosos, and that's what we want you to do as well. So if you can imagine a violin player playing lightning speed, imagine that level of virtuosity as a programmer. Now, 99% of the computer education out there does not do this. So you're very lucky to have stumbled into this course, because this course is going to show you how to do that. And how do you do that? Well, you have to practice the same way a virtuoso violin player or a star athlete or a star actor would practice is how you should be practicing programming. So the way that 99% of programming tutorials are taught like this. Here's an if statement, and that's all you need to do. You don't need to learn anything more about if statements. You never need to practice it again. In this course, we're going to be practicing the same way a soccer player, or football if you're international, but a soccer player would become the top soccer player. And how does one do that? Well, if I were to use that example again, if you learned how to kick a ball once, you're not all of a sudden going to the World Series and making millions of dollars. You have to practice pretty much your whole life. And coding is very similar. So we build practical projects and we teach you how to practice code the same way that these stars practice. And this is the one thing that we're going to be teaching you in this course, is how to become a virtuosic programmer. So going back with the last example of how to become a virtuosic programmer, one thing that, again, 99% of the computer education out there does not teach you is something called either muscle memory, or we like to call it coding memory. So you know how if you've learned a new sport, let's say tennis for instance, the first time it might be a bit hard, but once you practice enough, you get good at playing tennis. The thing is that once you leave tennis and come back to it, you're able to pick it up again, right? You're able to use the racket, you're able to hit the ball, and you're able to play somewhat at the level that you were before. Now, we do this with coding. We want to make sure that the concepts are ingrained so well in your system that you could leave coding for a year or two and come back to it and be able to kind of learn and kind of do coding. In addition to that, when we work with Apple products, Apple has a physical connection with the product. So you'll be seeing very shortly that in order to make a good user interface and hook it up to the code, you have to manually drag it in. Now, there's a way to do it programmatically, but Apple wants you to manually drag it in. And believe it or not, by doing that enough times, you can do it really quickly. Really good people who are designers can mock up an app design within a minute and it looks really good. And I'm going to teach you how to do that and how to make sure that you have the muscle memory and the coding memory so that you don't forget it over time. In this course, we're going to teach you not to code cram. What is code cramming? Well, if you've ever worked at a company or you've ever worked on your own project with a team or by yourself, you'll know that code cramming is where you try and get the code out for a specific deadline and you don't really care how it works. And especially if you work for a company, oftentimes that the code that's worked and released as a finished product is actually not very good. And you might think that the game you're playing that had a multi-million-dollar budget will have the most perfect code. Well, I don't want to ruin any fantasies, but a lot of the code that is released isn't actually very good. So I like to call this code cramming, where you just kind of look up the code and just kind of figure it out and it just works. You don't really care why it works or how it works. It just works in the end. This course is going to teach you how to not do that and how to make sure that your code is easy to understand, efficient, and that you understand everything. Because believe it or not, if you understand your code, you make your code efficient, and you make your code easy to read, your projects will be better as a result of that productivity, and you'll actually get to release more products. Short answer, if you don't code cram, you'll make more money and release more projects. Happens if your code doesn't work or there's some kind of bug or Swift gets updated? Well, first of all, before you ask a question, I highly recommend that you Google your bug first. There's a lot of code within Xcode that can go wrong. There's a lot of errors that can happen, and even Xcode isn't perfect. No software is perfect. If you're having an error, chances are hundreds of people have had the same error, and a few of those people have talked about it online. By talking about it online, people can go and get support. So most of the time, when people ask me a question or ask us a question, whether or not there's an error, most of the time when we do figure out the answer, it's in the first page of a Google search. So if you Google search the errors yourself and troubleshoot it yourself, you'll save everybody a lot of time, including yourself. Now, Xcode and Swift update a lot. Xcode Swift 1 was quite a bit different from Swift 2, and Swift 3 is different from Swift 2. So as the course goes along, there may be errata that we have to go and address. Sometimes the errata is as simple as there needs to be a question mark here or an exclamation mark here, or perhaps a comma is needed where before it's not needed. These kinds of errors can be dealt with in errata. However, there are other kinds of errors which we cannot deal with, and those will be recorded. The problem with Swift updating so much is that if the changes are minor, it's impossible to re-record the entire course. So with programming, and there's always going to be some level of errata, and we'll try and make sure that the experience is as best as possible for you. Let's talk a little bit about the deep dives and the practical projects. So when we're going through this course, we can build an app in half hour, an hour, or 2 hours and upload it to the App Store. That's the whole point of this. And a lot of people and a lot of students like this approach because a lot of computer engineering and computer science degrees don't even cover this. You know, if I were to design a computer science degree today, you would have to upload at least one app to the Google Play or the App Store a week. So if I wanted to get good at releasing apps, you have to do it a lot. Even if they're very simple apps, you should at least get in the habit of uploading apps. So that's part of what this course is supposed to do. It's supposed to get you in the habit of being a good coder, in the habit of uploading apps, and in the habit of, most importantly, making money. And if you do all those things, you'll be able to profit from this course and profit from the knowledge that you're going to receive in this course. At the same time, though, if you want to build apps, you do need a deeper understanding into how Swift works and how Xcode works. So we've really kind of built this course with two items in mind. First item is practical content that you can upload to the App Store and put on your LinkedIn and resume and use it to either get a job or to make money from the apps themselves. And the second item is to learn Swift into a very deep understanding of it. So in the deep dive section, we are going to be doing that. Now, these deep dives can last an hour plus. And if you're thinking, how would you ever talk about variables or, you know, UI labels or UI buttons for an hour? Oh, believe me, we can talk about that for pretty much an hour or two or three. But in Swift in particular, there are tons of different kinds of variables. There's different kinds of floats. There's different kinds of integers. In fact, there's for example, an integer is a positive or negative whole number, and there's a regular integer, there's a uint32, there's int16s, there's a whole bunch of different kinds, and we could really talk about variables for 10 hours, and I'm not even joking about that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you have practical content and practical applications with all of these deep dives. So these deep dives into variables, if statements, for loops last about an hour plus. And again, we could talk way more about these concepts for a lot more. Now, if you tend to feel like this is dragging on, and if you're going through a deep dive and you feel like it's dragging on or you want to get back to making apps, you can come back to it later. The deep dives are for deep understanding of the material, and the practical content is for mostly uploading to the App Store and getting the most amount on your resume as quickly as you can. So if you feel like you're in a deep dive and it's dragging on too long, you can always come back to it and finish it later, okay? When it comes to the deep dives, the first 15 to 20 minutes are what you need to know in order to use that concept, like if statements, UI labels, segmented control. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, but that's the first 15 or 20 minutes is what you need to know. And after that, we just give practical examples of how you can use it. And as the further we go, the more deep understanding you get, but at the same time, it can get to be a little bit more esoteric. But the people who do go through these deep dives 100% will have a very deep understanding. And if you're looking for a career in programming, that's what you want to do. So again, just to sum up, we want to make sure that you know that the deep dives in particular, if you want to skip them and come back to them, you're more than welcome to do that.